Welcome once again to the DRH Show. Today I'm joined by the founder of Therapy Finders, Claire Williams. Thanks for joining me.
Hello.
Well, it's great to have you here, Claire. I know you have been working in the therapy sector for quite some time, but for the benefit of everyone who's watching us, can you give us like an outline of your background, your trajectory in life, and how you ended up doing what you're doing?
Sure. Well, I actually started my work life doing something completely different. I was working for big law firms and big corporates doing IT project management. But after several years of doing that, I didn't really have any job satisfaction or job fulfillment. And I really wanted to do something that gave me those things, gave me that satisfaction, and gave me, a reason to get up in the morning, but also to try and make a difference in people's lives. I know that sounds corny, but it's the truth. And I myself had gone through therapy previously, and I credit that lady with changing my life for in so many ways, so much for the better. I credit her for the healthy person that sits here today talking to you. And I just thought it would be wonderful to be able to do that for somebody else. And so that's what I decided to do. So I retrained 13 years ago now, and I've been doing this ever since.
Brilliant. I know it really sounds cheesy when we kind of like, look for something more, where we can have more sense of purpose with what we're doing. But I could understand that because that's exactly what I've also done before, doing this thing. I used to be in academia, but I wasn't happy with it. And this is where I ended up. But back to you, Claire. I understand you specialize in grief counseling. So could you just give us a bit of an overview? What made you decide to do grief counseling?
Sure, yeah. I fell into it really, the grief counselling side of things. I started grief counselling whilst I was training. So as part of the diploma that I did, or all diplomas, you have to do a certain amount of client hours before you can qualify. And so in the last 2 years of the diploma, I had to find a placement. And at the time it was, find a placement, get the hours. And I wasn't sure which area I wanted to go into. So I, put applications out to several places, and I got offered a place at hospice, a wonderful hospice, the most incredible service. And to be honest with you, I didn't think that I would stay in it because I thought that I would want more diversity with the clients that I was seeing. So I went into it and I was working with bereaved people and soon to be bereaved people. And it wasn't long after I started that I realised that actually the work was extremely diverse, because grief is so personal and so different. No two people experience it in the same way. And every client that came to me was very different. And even if they were experiencing the same emotions, so for example, anger or sadness, the way people express those emotions are completely different between people. And so it was very diverse. And it felt such a privilege to me to be able to work with these people, often in the lowest point of their life. It became a privilege, and I felt honoured that they have allowed me to go on that journey with them and see their progression through their grief, and it became extremely fulfilling work for me.
Absolutely, and of course, it's a universal human emotion. Everyone of us, at some point in our lives, we will experience this. And of course, I understand that, just like what I said in the introduction, you created a website called Therapy Finders. So tell us more about Therapy Finders, and why do we need a website such as this one?
Okay, so Therapy Finders has been set up to help people get the right help, meet the right therapist quickly and effectively. So there are two elements to Therapy Finders. First of all, there's a matching service. And this is a completely free service for people looking for a therapist. And you'd answer a series of questions, simple questions, and then the system matches those questions to the therapists on our database, and that provides you with a short list of people who will all of them will be a match for your needs, and then you can choose who you'd like to work with. So it connects you with that person quickly and effectively. There's the other side of it is a service that's a brand new service that we've created called Emotional First Aid. And this service is designed as a single session service, which I always find really difficult to say. And it's there for people who aren't struggling or haven't got a long-term or deep-rooted issue, because we recommend the matching service for that. But somebody who is struggling in that moment with something that they just need to get out there, get off their chest, process through, or something that is troubling them at that moment. It's hoped that after this one session, they'll be able to go through their day more effectively and manage their day and cope with their day. It can also be used, as people that are a bit skeptical or a bit wary of trying therapy, or worried that they don't want to go into all this long-term work. It can also be designed for those people, just to give them that one session, in the hope that it helps their mental health. So that's the kind of the idea of the two services to therapy finders, and the whole idea behind the company is that we get you the help that you need. So it's tailored to your needs, to the issues that you're struggling with, and the way that you want to work as well. I think that the reason that we need this service is, so from my perspective, when I was a client looking for a therapist, it took me several attempts to find the lady who was absolutely fabulous, but I had to go through several other therapists to find her. And that's not to say they weren't fantastic. They just weren't right for me, and what I needed. And that was because I didn't know where to look. I didn't know what I needed to talk about. I didn't know the type of therapy that I needed, and it was just a bit of a stab in the dark, trying to find this lady, who I did eventually find, but it could have been a lot quicker. And then when I became a therapist myself, when you qualify, you get told by your lecturers, they get recommended some of the directories that you can go on and put your profile on to get work. So I did that, and I put myself on a couple of the big directories, and I was looking at it from a client perspective, and there's a lot of information on these directories. There's hundreds of thousands of therapists out there. And what I found was the directories, although they're fantastic at looking people up, it didn't help you to make that connection. Understand who you needed to see. They ask you a few questions, logistical questions, but then if you're looking in a big city, for example London, if you just put in a London postcode, you come up, there are hundreds of therapists in a list, and it doesn't help you to decide which one is the right one for you. So what Therapy Finders has tried to do is take the pain and the difficulty out of finding that right person. So it's designed to, people that are looking for a therapist are already in a very anxious time. And so what we've tried to do is create a service that helps you through your anxiety, through that daunting task of finding the right person, and sort of hold your hand almost to try and get you the help that you need.
It sounds really like a dating website, and you just it helps you look for the perfect partner. And I understand what you mean. Well, we're not going to mention names, but I'm quite familiar with some directories that you're talking about. And sometimes most of them, especially the bigger ones, are based in America. I'm not using these directories, but I would imagine that if you use this, a lot of this would be, giving you directories which have, which are based in America. So I think that Therapy Finders really fills in the gap wherein you're offering a more specialized results. But
Yeah.
Claire, I understand aside from Therapy Finders, you're also offering resources. And from my understanding is that you've carried out this research where you found out that 30% of adults in the UK believe that grief should last no longer than 6 months. And there is also evidence in conjunction to that that grief, according to some adults, should take around 18 months. Now, in your professional experience, Claire, can we really put a time limit on grief?
Absolutely not. No. As I said before, grief is such a personal experience. No two people will experience it in the same way. There's this phrase that I hate, you should be over it by now. There really is no should when it comes to grief. Partly because you have no idea how you're going to feel or how you're going to experience that grief until it actually happens. Even if you have an expected death, someone is poorly and the outlook is terminal. Even in those cases, until it actually happens and that person has died, you have no idea how you're going to feel. And so it's impossible to say, well, I'll give myself 6 months or 18 months or whatever it is. I worked with a lady once whose twin sister died at a relatively young age, in her late 20s, of breast cancer. And they were expecting it. They knew it was coming. And so they prepared themselves as best they could. And, when you know someone's going to die, you expect to feel sadness. But what this lady actually felt was really profound anger. And it took her by surprise because she just wasn't expecting that emotion at all. And so it took a long time to understand where that anger came, why that anger was there, where it came from. And then to process the anger and then move on through processing the grief was a very long process. And had she kind of said, well, I'm only going to give myself 6 months or 12 months or whatever to grieve this person, she wouldn't have gone through that process. And it could have kind of come back through different periods of her life. She could have been triggered by anything if you don't process it properly. So to put a time limit on it is impossible.
I understand, Claire, that no grief look the same, but can you share to us some sort of common signs that, when we're not dealing with grief properly? What are the telltale signs?
Okay, yeah. The common signs of grief themselves, is things like, loss of appetite. People will not want to eat if they're grieving, not being able to sleep, or, this profound sadness. Also, what people experience quite a lot is not seeing any point, not any point in life, not any point in anything. Like, where's the point? A lot of my clients say that. There's just no point anymore. So these are really common side effects of grief, if you like. But if someone isn't coping with their grief, the things to look out for are, are they struggling to do day-to-day activities, such as, leaving the house, taking a shower, getting out of bed, those things that you would normally, although you're grieving, you can still do, but you can't if you're not coping with it. If you find that someone is withdrawing from friends and family and just isolating themselves and just, shutting themselves away, this is also a sign that someone isn't coping and they need some help.
So what can we do to kind of, manage those grief, and also how can we support loved ones who are experiencing grief?
Yeah, I think, if you know somebody that you think isn't coping with their grief, the first thing to do and the most important thing to do is reach out to them. Just let them know that you've noticed. Let them know that you've noticed these signs and you're worried and you're there. And if they want to talk to you, that some people don't want to talk and they find it very difficult to talk. But just to show that you've noticed and to show that you care will mean a lot, whether they want to talk to you or not. Even if it's just a case of sitting there in silence with them, or going to the shop for them, or anything that they need, and if they can articulate what they need, or just sitting there while they cry, or giving them a hug, just having that support often goes a long way, because a lot of time people feel like they're going through it on their own because it is such a personal thing. And people often think, well, you don't understand how I feel. And that's, to an extent that is true, because it is a personal experience. But all of us have experienced grief in some way, or will do throughout our lives. And so although we don't experience it in the same way, we can have empathy for what that person's going through. And often just to show someone that you've noticed will mean a lot.
Now, are there any specific strategies or exercises that we could do to kind of manage the grief?
Yeah. One of the ones that I've found really helpful for clients is to journal. And often with grief, we experience a range of emotions all at the same time. And one moment we're feeling angry, one moment we're feeling sad, one moment we're feeling, I'm confused. And these thoughts and feelings can become really overwhelming when they're inside. And so if you just get it out on a piece of paper, and it doesn't have to be long, beautifully constructed sentences or paragraphs. It doesn't need to make any sense. If you just kind of do a brain dump onto a piece of paper, it can be really helpful in first of all, kind of trying to understand what you're going through and what you're feeling, but also to just get that release, get it out of you, and try and make some sense of the confusion that's in your head. So journaling in any way, brain dump journaling, if you want to, obviously you can write full sentences, and if whatever works for you. So getting it out, getting a piece of paper and a pen and writing can be really helpful. Another really useful thing to do can be if someone has died unexpectedly or suddenly, and you feel that there are things that are left unsaid. It can be helpful to try and write those down as well. Maybe write a letter to that person. Again, it's the same sort of idea as journaling. It's just getting those thoughts and feelings out of your head and onto a piece of paper. What some grief therapists will do, and I recommend doing this only in therapy, because the therapist can facilitate this for you. But there's this really useful technique called two-chair work. And it's where you talk to the person as if they are still in the room and sitting on a chair in front of you. But again, I would say, do that in therapy. But again, that can be a really useful way of getting those last words out that you weren't able to say, or expressing emotions that you didn't or weren't able to say while that person was alive. It's also really helpful to try and remember happy memories. And I know some people don't like that and feel ashamed of remembering people with happiness and laughter, but it can be really cathartic to remember those happy times, and remember that this person had a wonderful relationship with this person, and then don't let those good memories fade. One that I think is really important, and we as a society, I would say, don't tend to do enough, and that's to release the emotion through crying or sound in some way, screaming, for example. Crying can be so helpful in releasing the emotion and the feelings inside you. And we don't cry enough. I think we look at crying like, well, quickly pull the tears away. If I want to wipe the tears away, but those tears are flowing for a reason, and often once you've had a good cry, you will feel better. Personally, when I was grieving, I was down at the Brighton seaside, and one night I just felt overwhelmed by the emotions that were going on inside me. And I stood at the seafront and I just screamed at the sea. And I know that's not going to be for everybody, but I felt instantly lighter, and just something shifted in me. It's just all about that release, and not holding things in. When we hold things in is when they become overwhelming and unhelpful. So in release in any way.
Absolutely. So release, whether through screaming, crying, or even writing. Thanks for those tips, Claire.
Mm.
Now, obviously, the primary situation where we experience grief would be death. Could you give us examples where we could also experience grief as a result of that?
Absolutely. As you say, the most common one, we all associate with grief is death. But grief can come with any loss. So anything from, loss of a friendship, loss of a pet. We are a nation of pet lovers, and they definitely become part of our families for many, many people. And so when a pet dies, it can be really, really difficult and can invoke grief. Not just that, when we experience the loss of a job that we loved, or even when we experience loss of our identity. So, the one that springs to mind there is when a mother has a child, and all of a sudden, that child is the sole focus, and the mother loses her old identity and loses those freedoms that she had. And all of these things can trigger grief. And it's really important to recognize that it is grief, and to allow yourself that time to grieve the loss of the job, the loss of your identity, whatever it is, and whatever that grief looks like for you. It's really important that you acknowledge the grief and work through it and give it time to process.
Yeah, I think ultimately, like if we put value on something, be it, experiences or property or pet, and when we lost it, ultimately there's grief. I think that's the bottom line for that. Now, Claire, let's go back to your research, because I understand that you also found out that only 17% of Brits have spoken to a professional about their grief. This is quite a low number. So why do you think this is?
Unfortunately, I think this is indicative of our society in general. I think, we are, and it is getting better, but there is definitely still a stigma around mental health and talking about anything, not just grief, like any kind of mental health. There is still this stigma. Talking about it is a sign of weakness, or it's just not the thing to do. And as I say, this is changing in the younger generations, and as they come through, the old ideas are changing. But particularly in the older generations, it wasn't the done thing to talk about feelings or emotions or show any kind of feeling. It's this very British kind of stiff upper lip attitude where particularly in males, older males, it's just not something that they've grown up doing, or it's not seen as the male way or the masculine way. And so I think that is a lot of the reasons why people don't talk about their grief. I also think, people think they're going to be a burden if, oh God, particularly if they are surrounded by people who are telling them, well, you should be over it by now. If you then start thinking, oh God, I'm going to be a burden if I keep talking about this. So you put it inside and you don't talk about it. Some people also think it's not important enough to talk about. So I think there are lots of elements depending on the type of situation you're in, and the type of and your age group as well, which stop people talking. But I think the overarching reason is probably because it's just mental health is just not considered as important, and it's something that you should be able to get through on your own, and just pull yourself together kind of attitude. So, and as I say, things like that are changing and attitudes are changing, but it's a slow road, and we just got to keep pushing that message out there that talking isn't a sign of weakness. Getting those emotions out, talking about your feelings, and it is the right thing to do. And the more we say it, hopefully the more people will recognize it and do it.
And of course, Claire, in relation to this, you've also undertaken some research about the mental health state of the nation. And you found out that 2 in 5 have anxiety and a third have depression. and more than required to have a low self-esteem. Of course, these are not very positive results. So what can you attribute this to?
It doesn't surprise me that these statistics came back low on this. Sorry, high on this. When it comes to anxiety, we have lived through quite a lot in the last few years. We had COVID, and now we've got the cost of living crisis, and the war in Ukraine, and there's lots and lots of things out there going on out in the world that could actually could cause people's anxiety. Sorry, stumbling over my words. So it doesn't surprise me. We're also bombarded all the time with social media and, the way we should look, the way we shouldn't look, what we should wear, what we shouldn't wear. There's all this, and if people don't feel like they're living up to these unattainable images, or, that can cause deep, profound feelings in people, and that they're, either not achieving what they should, or they're not looking the way they should, or I could do better. We're constantly being compared to, people who have got a lot of everything. You see it all the time on Instagram and all the other social media channels. So it's no surprise to me that people are struggling. What I would say to these people is, don't struggle in silence. It's when these things don't get spoken about, and when you don't talk about it, that they become overwhelming, and then they have more detrimental effect on your health. So I would always say just talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And Claire, of course, it's not just limited to our personal lives. We also see it in our working lives, as evidenced by your research, where you found that 60% said that they don't believe their workplaces truly cares, and only about 37% believe that if they share their struggles, they're not really coping well.
Yeah. I think this is, a lot of this again is around this stigma around mental health. Good mental health is as important as good physical health, but we don't see it that way. We don't. There's no stigma around if you break your leg, going to get it mended, or any physical ailment. You go to the doctor, you get the medicine, and it's absolutely fine. But it's not the case with mental illness. Mental illness is considered a sign of weakness, and actually often people who are living with mental illness, they often have to summon up incredible strength and courage to just get on with their day and take on the responsibilities of their everyday life. And I think when it comes to the workplace, the workplace is often quite a competitive place, and so because of these ideas that mental health is a sign of weakness, or I'm not as good as someone who has got good mental health, I think people tend to worry that it's going to impact their job, so they're not going to be put up for that promotion if they admit to having a mental illness or they're struggling mentally, and so they keep it inside and they push it down. It will eventually come out. It always does. Somehow it will come out. But I think the reason for people not wanting to talk about it in the workplace is due to worrying that it's going to be detrimental to their career. I think this idea that the workplace, whether the workplace doesn't truly care, this statement that they don't truly care, and I think this comes from there are more and more companies that are out there now putting things in place for their employees with their benefits. But with some companies, it feels like it's just a box ticking exercise rather than an actual genuine offer of support. Because a lot of the companies, they'll have it in their contract, or it'll be mentioned once, and then there's no mention of it again. I think one of the research showed that people just don't know how to access a lot of it. They know there is company policy, that it exists, but they don't know how to access it. And this is because the companies aren't letting them know. They aren't promoting it. They aren't saying it, where your mental health really matters to us. And so when the company doesn't truly care, I think that's where it comes from. It's just that the ethos isn't there in the companies, although the policy may be.
So I just want to touch upon what you said. So this is some companies, you said it could just be a box ticking exercise. So what do you think they can do to, transition to something more of a genuine support? Can you give some specific examples what they can do?
Yeah, absolutely. It has to come from the top. These messages of this message that your mental health is important to us has to come from the people at the top, and it has to be a company ethos. It can't just be it's mentioned once at the beginning of the job and never mentioned again. It needs to be a company-wide idea that your mental health matters. We value you as a person. We value your mental health. We are going to support you. We aren't going to judge you. It's not going to impact your career if you come to us and use this policy that we have in place to help with your mental health. Simple things that companies can do to promote this idea that we care about your mental health is, if you've got a company intranet, for example, you could promote mental health awareness week with links on how to get support or other external phone numbers that people might find helpful. At larger companies, they could offer in-house therapy if they had the budgets for it. This could either be a permanent role or somebody that comes in on a weekly basis, and the employees can book slots with these people anonymously, obviously. One of the things that managers can do very easily is to just, if they see that an employee is struggling or a particular employee isn't taking breaks or hasn't had a lunch for a week, find out why. Find out, are they overwhelmed? Are they overworked? Discreetly and empathically talk to that person. Check in with them, ask them if they're okay. It's a really simple thing to do, but because we're all so busy in our work days, people just tend to push these things aside. That person's all right, and don't take that time to make that connection. That even if you do reach out to the employee, they may choose they don't want to talk to you. They may choose to turn around and say, no, everything is fine. But what that message is, the message that it's sending to that employee is that I've noticed you and I care about you. And it's just really simple things like that can go a long way in encouraging employees to take advantage of the health benefits, but also to show employees that this company actually does care about me. It does value me. So it isn't, there are obviously large things you can do if you've got a lot of budget, but it's, that human connection can go a long way.
Absolutely. And when you mentioned about this in-house therapy, it's really important, because if I could just share, my partner works in the rail industry, and a lot of people are not aware, probably some people are aware, that there's a lot of people who die of suicide in train stations. I wouldn't be too graphic on this, but I'm sure a lot of people would understand what I mean. And especially for train drivers, it could be a very traumatic experience if you see someone like die in front of a train, and even for working at the platforms. And I think it's really important that we support whatever industry with in-house therapy, because it's really devastating, not just for the family, but also for the people working there who witness these events. I've known a lot of persons, especially train drivers, who's been devastated by these experiences. But anyway, Claire, we've already talked about grief, and in generic terms, we also talk about mental health and how it impacts workplaces and well-being and all of that. But I'd like to wrap this up with something more lighthearted. So I prepared 3 quick fire questions for you. So the first one is, what were you afraid of as a child?
Oh, okay. What was I afraid of as a child? What was I afraid of as a child? I think I was afraid of, the normal things that kids are afraid of. I was afraid of the dark. I used to always have to sleep with the landing light on. I can't really think of anything I was afraid of as a child. I think the dark, probably the biggest one.
Yeah, that's fine. I was also afraid of the dark as a child. I mean, who wasn't? Um, what is your favorite word in another language?
Word.
Yes,
Uh, Excuse my pronunciation, but I love what I need.
which means
It means I love you in
I like
Mandarin.
it. Okay. And if you were working with therapy finders, what would you have pursued in your life?
Oh wow! So I love diving. I think I'd like to be a scuba diver instructor.
And finally, Claire, the floor is all yours. What should people take away from today's conversation? We talk a lot about things, but what's the final takeaway?
For me, so I would just like to just keep pushing that, that idea that we just need to talk. We need to talk more about mental health. We need to make it the normal thing, not the thing that that gets hidden away and pushed aside. Mental health is so important. It is so important, and we just need to keep talking about it and reaching out to people who we think are struggling, offering that empathic ear can mean so much to somebody if they think they're going through something on their own. Reach out, be kind, and just know that there are people out there that can help. If you want it and you want to reach out and find that help, there are people out there that are waiting to help you.
Lovely message, Claire. Claire Williams, founder of Therapy Finders. It's great to have you here on the DRH show.
Thank you so much for having me.